Welcome back to Live With, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm Dave Palumbo, and today's topic is, I call it the King and the Mad Scientist. Ameen Alai is back for part 2, and we are joined also with King Kamali. King, you contacted me after you saw the Ameen Alai interview, part 1, and you were like, man, I got stories to add to that. So I said, let's bring it on.
Yeah,
what'd you think of the stories? Were they pretty accurate?
Yeah, man. I mean, the parts that I know of were 100% accurate, but I don't know the Tony Freeman stuff. I wasn't really close to Jennifer Greenbaum's husband, so that stuff was a little, gray area for me. But most of it, I mean, you have no idea. Kids, not you, but in general, people don't know what Ameen has done, what we've gone through, how we started all this shit, and just the stories are insane. Yes, to answer your question, yes, I got 1,000 stories.
Well, there was little pockets of people who knew what was going on and were kind of doing their own experiments back in that 90s era. Ameen was doing it with you guys kind of in that Virginia area. I was up in New York doing my little thing. Milos was out in California doing his thing. So there were pockets around the country. Chad then, started up at some point also in the Missouri area. But there were pockets, and I think even before Chad came around, really, Ameen, you guys were kind of doing it first around the same time I was. I might have been a little behind you guys, but around the same era. I remember Jason Arntz, who also was in New Jersey, and I had a lot of connections with him as well. Talk to me. Tell me a story that's going to make me laugh about that time frame, relating it to what Ameen was saying last week.
It was the camaraderie, man. We were like a family, but not really a family. We all competed against each other to see which one of us can become the biggest, the most famous. And I would look at Don Long, and I didn't even know Don, to be honest with you, and he wasn't even on the radar. He was a okay light heavyweight, local light heavyweight, and no legs, no back, just big arms. And then Ameen got his hands on this guy, and next thing I remember is we were at the DC Grand Prix, and Don is walking with RJ and his crew down the aisle, and he's got 3 towels that he's wiping his sweat off, and he's huffing and puffing, and his legs are like this. I'm like, what the fuck did you do to this guy? Insulin. There's nothing like it in the world. And that's when I said, yo, man, you got to fucking teach me this shit, man. I don't know what the hell you did, but you got to teach me this stuff.
What did you do, Ameen, to Don Long? What was the thing that lit the fire under his growth spurt?
I want to tell people, because I think there's this big misconception that large doses can make you bigger. We found what I would call the sweet spot, the right amount of growth so that his organs wouldn't grow, so that he would just continue to get big. Enough insulin for the food that he was eating. We weren't eating sugar. He was putting the glycogen straight into the muscle. It was basically timed food, and we were eating the right amount of food, the right portions of food that he could digest. I mean, it was pretty much tailored to him, but at the same time, the initial protocol could be modified for anybody's body type.
Let me call a spade in this one, because you and I both know there are guys in the gym that are just freaking genetic freaks. And if you put a little science behind these guys, because they don't know what the freak they're doing. I mean, Don was an exotic dancer. He probably just wanted to have abs and arms, and he was happy with that. You put a guy like that on a real diet, put him on a couple of drugs in the right combination, and guys, the genetics just take over at that point, and you see people just transform in front of your face. It's unbelievable. So, I mean, you've seen it happen. Look at Ronnie Coleman.
Yeah, man. It's. I mean, listen. Ameen was helping a lot of people in the Maryland, D.C., Virginia area. Only a handful of us made it to that next level. I mentioned the guy RJ. RJ was doing the same amount of shit, if not more, than Don. He just didn't respond the way Don did.
Right.
Or me. I remember Ameen wouldn't let me touch a lot of the stuff. He said, "You're not ready. Your receptors are still." They're screaming for the basics. Just take the basics, And for me, it was after I finished my first teenage shows, I did my first cycle. I gained 70 fucking pounds to the point where stretch marks of red lightning bolts going up my chest and my quads and my calves. My father thought I had some type of a thyroid problem. You know, and I'm sitting here like gaining weight so fast, and it was on minimal shit. You know, just a little bit of tests and but the stuff that we took. This is one thing yesterday which I was loving to hear is the stuff like the good old milk. I mean, Ameen used to tell me all this stuff. Put it in the fridge, man. Put it in the fridge. What was it called? The suspension they used to have. Oh my God.
Steris.
Oh my God. That and the Humatrope they used to come with in those little foam cases with the dry ice. Oh my God.
The bricks, yeah.
Fucking
good old. Don't forget the real Winstrol V that didn't actually knot up in you and shit, you know?
Yeah, it was, you didn't even have to mix it with the B12. You just take it straight. Yeah, and it was amazing. It was just it was the absolute best time of bodybuilding for me. Even through when I won the nationals and turned professional, that became a business for me, and it became a little bit more serious. The most fun I ever had was during that time with Ameen.
Yeah, because it was pure. It was like you said, we did it for the fun of the sport. It didn't matter what it costed. It was like a hobby, you know.
Yeah, it was Dave, legendary hit bags.
I gotta interject. There are a lot of people that, like he said, there are only a few of them made it to the top. Kamali he's an exceptional person. Okay, what I mean that is that add bodybuilding to that equation, add bodybuilding to that personality, that character type, he's going to excel. He could have excelled in anything he wanted to. He was so determined, though, to be a pro bodybuilder, just like Arnold. There was no difference. His vision was so clear that I knew at a very young, even as a teenager, I knew this guy was going to turn pro. You could just tell. Like Jay Cutler, when I met him, he had already been pro, but I was like, he's going to do really well. He may win the Olympia. You know what I mean? I said the same thing when I met Dexter. I couldn't believe how good he looked as a middleweight at the Southern States. I'm like, and I actually talked to him for real, found out what he did, basically nothing. And I was like, that's it. It's just a matter of time before he does what my brother did or what I'm doing or what Don did or any of these other guys I'm helping. When he stumbles across more than one thing, it's a wrap. And that's what happened with him. And Kamali, his main longevity in the sport, I would say, came from the foundation that he built, which was when his teenage years of eating and lifting heavy. He would try to lift weights that weren't possible for him to lift, but he did it just to get the negative so that the next time he could get one rep. So that, this guy bent over road 405 as a teenager. He made himself strong. I want to say this in bodybuilding as a compliment. This isn't a negative way, but in a way to do this, and I think Kai Green said this, he's a little sick, but in a good way for bodybuilding. I would say, Kamali, you're so determined that, it's beyond like an obsession that when you wanted to turn pro. But at the same time, he never said, I'm going to cut corners and take 2 or 3 or 4 anadrols to get there faster. We knew that muscle took time to synthesize, and he knew that it was hard work and nutrition that were the cornerstones. And if anything else was added, that was great. But there were times when he didn't have anything. He was totally clean, and he still trained just as hard. He never not trained hard. He always trained hard, whether he was clean, whether he didn't eat right, whether he was depressed. It didn't matter. He trained hard.
Well, that's the way it was back then. You remember Champions Day Bob Bonham used to hold at his gym every year? And
yeah.
If you place top 5 at a national show, Junior USA, Junior Nationals, USA, North American Nationals, you got invited. And I remember it must have been 95, and I think I had won, I don't know if I had won the Junior National. Maybe it was 95. And, everyone knew who everyone was. You knew who the guys you had to beat were. And I knew Don Long was one of the guys that I was going to obviously have to go up against at some point or possibly go up against. And Don showed up at that Champions Day that year. He was enormous. He was so big. I'm like, there's no way this guy's losing the Nationals this year. He's gonna walk through the Nationals, which is what he did in '95 essentially. It was one of those days. It was one of those things where people couldn't see each other all the time on the internet. There was no social media. There was no internet. So you had to go to these events to actually see people in the off season. Otherwise, you only saw them at shows. And I think that's why it was a different era. That's why people respected what they were doing, because you had to see people in person. You could hear from the little sparrow that so-and-so looks good, but until you actually saw them, maybe the only other time you would see them would be at the Arnold Classic, where people would go to Jim Lorimer's gym there, the World Gym, and train, that on the Thursday before the show, and everyone would be like, holy, look at that guy, did you see that guy's legs? And so-and-so is going to be really good this year. And there was an excitement that just doesn't seem to be in the industry anymore.
A perfect example of that would be the DC Grand Prix the year Levrone had turned pro. And Vince, exactly like you say, you didn't have the internet, so you would have to sit there and go to these shows. And I remember, I was a kid, man, and I remember Vince Taylor walked in, and everybody's like, holy shit, he was God back then.
Right.
And he walked in there, and he stood in the aisle with his arms crossed, and he's waiting for Kevin to guest pose. And Levrone came out there to crisscross to jump. And he said, wiggity, 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 whack. When he did wiggity, wiggity, whack, he flexed his quad.
That was crazy.
Vince put his hands on, fuck is that? And he walked out of the fucking arena. I'll never forget that. I was a kid. I was like, did Vince Taylor just look at that and say, holy shit, I got to get back in the gym? What was that? That's the kind of shit you don't see anymore.
Right. That must have been exciting watching Levrone in his early amateur years coming up, because no one saw that guy coming, and it was such a quick rise, from placing second behind DeMeo at the Junior Nationals to winning the Nationals that same year and beating DeMeo and Flex Wheeler. No one could have seen that coming.
I've heard, we all heard. We heard of Levrone, and we heard that there was some guy, the Maryland Muscle Machine, that he was coming and this and that, but nobody really expected that. And you want to talk about a genetic freak? That guy would take a halotestin and gain 10 pounds of muscle. That's how Kevin was. He still is.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, Kevin is still like that. He'll take a halotestin and he'll wake up 5 pounds heavier the next day. It's amazing.
One week before the Olympias, barefoot squatting 6 plates. No bullshit. I don't know why barefoot. No belt, no shoes. I don't know why no shoes. But that's 1 week before the Olympia, 6 plates on each side. Yeah, unreal.
Yeah, he would do wacky shit like that. Yeah, all the time. All right, Kamali, now that we got you on the show, tell us how the whole Craig TITUS feud started with you. I want to hear from your perspective. Ameen gave us a little taste last week, but tell us how the whole thing synthesized from the beginning to the when it got to be the worst on stage.
It was Craig's ego. Exactly what Ameen was talking about yesterday. Craig had a humongous ego, and he remembered me as the light heavyweight collegiate nationals guy who he didn't have to worry about. That's how he saw me, But what he did is he underestimated how psychotic and how far I was willing to go in the suffering.
Yes. Yes.
I can suffer. I can suffer to the point of when my eyes will roll back in my head, and I will have my training partner standing next to me on the treadmill. And I said, if my eyes start rolling back in my head, smack me as hard as you can and tell me to concentrate. That's how far I would take it when it came to that. Come on, man. I knew I was going to go up against Dexter Jackson, and I knew that I had to take it to levels that I had never taken before. That's what it was. For me with Craig was, I'm telling you, he was just Mr. Ego. And when I called the Flex magazine people, and I said, listen, how come you guys never call me up and ask any of us from the East Coast to be in the magazines and stuff? And they're like, you know what? It's just too far. You guys are too far. We can walk right into Venice, see the guys, take pictures with them, interview them. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do to get some hype? I got my first pro show coming. And he said, well, controversy gets you in. And that's when that whole thing started. And I said, well, West Coast guys are weak. East Coast guys are more serious. And we got this, and we got Olympus Gym, and we got the East Coast, this and that. And then, of course, who are the first two people that, took the bait? Melvin and Craig. All right? But Melvin was a clown, and it was different. Melvin was not like Craig. Melvin was, he was more fun. Yeah. Craig took it personally. So it was a personal thing for him. And for me, it was a piece of cake. I told you, Dave, I'd be on the stage at the Ironman. All I have to say is one word to Craig, fat, and he would lose his mind. You know, he would lose his fucking mind. Or at the Olympia, we were doing our quarter turns, and I said bald, and he lost his mind again.
Oh, is that what you would? I didn't. No one doesn't knows what would incite him. So that's what you were doing. You were yelling. You were pushing his buttons.
Well, there was three guys. There were three guys that sat in the front row, and I used to ask because they would always be in the front row at the Olympia. Right. So I asked Amelia. I said, Wayne, who are these guys? And he said they get front row seats every year. There was these three gay guys.
Right.
And these three gay guys were hammering Craig the whole time. They were getting under his skin. And I was, I became their friends on stage. So I was like egging them on.
Right.
So they kept saying shit to Craig. And Craig kept saying, fuck you, you faggots. Fuck you.
So he was arguing with the
and
fans.
Melvin, of course, Melvin's like laughing his ass off and then, doing his stuff. Melvin was more thuggy than taking it personal. So he was more gangster.
Right. So then Craig would try to come back and impersonate you, and it was actually very comical. I didn't know if you guys were serious, or I mean, was it ever at the point where you guys were going to fight each other, or was it always like just tongue in cheek?
We were at a show in Texas, and I was in the audience, and somebody was hammering Craig on stage, really making a lot of fun of him. And Kelly was 2 seats behind me, and Craig is blind. You know that he can't see anything.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So Craig kept squinting in the audience, and he thought I was doing all the talking.
Oh.
So he pointed to me and went like this on stage. So I turned around and I wasn't really friends with Kelly. I said, "You better tell him it's not me." And she goes, "I'll tell him." So she ran backstage and told him. But that's the closest he ever got to ever really. Right. Craig was all talk. He wasn't a fighter. He was
a cheap shot guy. He hit a few people in Gold's Venice. He got kicked out of there a few times, didn't he, for fighting?
I think he did, but he
punch out Arnie List or something?
I think he probably got kicked out for mouthing off. I know there was one attempted fight that he got kicked out for too.
He punched out Arnie List. Remember Arnie List?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I don't know. Arnie List is the least likely guy to ever start a fight probably in the history of bodybuilding, and Craig somehow punched him out. I don't know why. What I want to ask you, Ameen, is you mentioned something to me. We were texting last night, and we were talking about Richard Greenbaum and how he kind of befriended Craig and was kind of in Craig's corner, and he was like a little bit of a gossip too. May he rest in peace. He's not with us anymore. But you told me something that blew my mind. You said that, and I didn't even know that Craig was in touch with anyone. After Craig and Kelly had committed the murder, or whatever happened out there in Vegas, they were on the run for a while. And Craig, evidently, from what you tell me, was in contact with Richard?
Yeah.
Tell us what transpired. What did Richard tell you?
Richard told me that Craig tried to get 2 of his friends that were involved in real estate as accomplices to come up with an alibi for him and Kelly. The girl had owed, according to Craig, who told Richard, who told me, the girl had OD'd on drugs. Craig felt as if he had murdered her because he was the one that pushed the needle into her vein. The drugs were a concoction of methamphetamine and OxyContin or Codone, one of those things they did. A pharmaceutical speedball, basically. The girl died, and the taser marks were to revive her, according to Craig, who told Richard.
What did he think? It was like Pulp Fiction? Like he was trying to shock her heart with a taser?
He didn't. You have to put yourself in the mindset of him.
Of a drug addict.
Of a drug addict. He's high on meth. He probably hasn't slept for days. He's doing another drug that keeps up and down, up and down. He's in a psychosis sort of state. So he's not rational enough to just call an ambulance or say that this person, or call 911. And not to mention the fact that he had criminal inclinings and he's an underlying shitty person. Like underliningly, he's a really shitty person. Like he's slimy, like a used car salesman. The charisma and all that was great before the drugs. Once the drugs kicked in, you could see through that shit, and you could tell it was all lies and bullshit. I mean, listen, man, this same guy tried to pay me, he offered me $5,000 not to help Tony Freeman because he thought Tony Freeman would beat him.
Oh, my God.
That's crazy. And this is true.
And the other shit that he took. You talked about this yesterday, too. I mean, when he came to stay with Ameen, and you guys talked about this yesterday, Ameen called me up and said, "Hey, Craig's here. You want to come see him?" And I said, "Of course." So when I went over there, When I walked into the room, the first thing I saw was Craig laying on the floor with 3 syringes in his quads.
Yeah.
What was he shooting?
But it was all white, so I was thinking he was suspension and Winnie. It had to be one of those two.
Right.
You know, and then he looks at me and he goes, well, hey, bro, what's up? I'm like, how you doing, man? This and that. And I sit down and he goes, don't ever do this. This is too much. I said, okay, I won't ever do this.
That's funny. So let's get back to the Craig and Kelly thing. So they're high as out of their mind on drugs, obviously not thinking rationally. Melissa is there with them doing the drugs. She loses consciousness. Craig then says to himself, "This is and tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, you know what? Get the taser. We'll see if we can shock her heart back into working again." Is that
the thing? That's what Richard said. Just like, bringing someone back, when their heart goes out, cardiorrhythmia, same thing.
Yeah, but wasn't the taser mark on the neck? I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it was because honestly, I didn't look into it. I just remember the phone call that Richard called me, and then shortly after that, he took a plane, and that's where he got caught up in Boston, like literally the next day.
So they taser. At what point? What did they do after that? What did Craig tell Richard that they did after that? Where did they concoct this whole scheme to burn the body and put it in the
So
desert?
step by step, my recollection, and it's pretty clear of this event because it was one of the things that shocked me. They were both scared and they didn't know what to do. After the tasing didn't work, then they saw the marks wherever it was, whether it was the neck or there could have been multiple, whatever. From my understanding, there was no bruises on the body other than those taser marks.
Yeah.
So it was like she was assaulted or anything. So it is possible this story could have some weight. I'm not really sure. Now, what happened after that was they put her body in a car and made it look like she was just about to leave the residence, and they put the needle, they staged another needle in her arm to make it look like she OD'd herself in the car right before she left. Now here's where it gets tricky, and this is why Richard knows what happened, or so he claimed. They called up 2 of his friends to come watch a movie, and when the whole thing went down, Craig and Kelly were having that with the girl in the car. The garage door was open and the car lights were on, and the car was on the whole time. They were hoping, at least this is what Richard said again, they were hoping that the 2 guests that they invited over would witness it, and then they could be like, oh, wow, look what happened. But that didn't actually pan out. They never actually went through the whole process of it. But Richard did confirm that they did go to his house to watch a movie, and that her name is Melissa, right?
Yes,
Melissa was in the
James.
Yeah, she was in the vehicle, and they didn't say that was it. Like, they didn't go look any further or anything like that. So at that point, they realized that their quote unquote alibi was not going to work. And then now according to Richard, the body started to get colder, and it started to change, and it was obvious that they were past the time of claiming that it was a real death. So then he figured he had to dispose of the body. Richard then told me that if he would have claimed that he just disposed of an already dead body, he might have actually gotten away with that and not actually murder. But I think that he had, for whatever reasons, enough evidence against him that it wasn't a fightable case, and I think he took the plea in order to save Kelly. Whatever actually transpired, nobody will ever know. But I can tell you that, and Kamali can say, because we saw it from when he was his best to the very end. It was extremely sad what happened to him. However, I think it was inevitable, and I think Kamali would say that too. If you got to know the guy, you would have to say that there was something about him that wasn't right. So even the fact that he may or may not have killed the girl, the fact that he went through that length to cover up something just tells you that it's beyond a normal person's reaction. So he has some sort of psychotic behavior.
Yeah, I agree.
King, do you think it was the drugs that made him not think right? Because, I mean, any
100%.
other normal person would have called 911, right?
100%. 100%. Why don't you call? Yeah, call this person OD'd. I got nothing to do with it.
I think when we
or even if he did have
done.
something to do with it, it's not murder. He didn't kill her. I mean, if that really was the case.
That's the irrational. That's the irrational person. That's the drugs taking over. Dave, by the way, your boy Valentino gave me third place on the biggest partier of all time in the IFBB. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So did my parents. They appreciated that one too a lot. But I had fun, but at the same time, I got to see what fucking drugs do. I mean, I saw normal people acting like complete fucking douchebags and the G'ing out and the club and all that stuff. And then you think beer goggles? Have you ever tried ecstasy goggles? My God, you would fuck Medusa at the end of the night if you were horny enough. I saw this whole thing and the wife swapping. I mean, come on, Dave. We can do like 20 episodes on swingers and the IFBB. Come on, you know that.
Was that a true story about Dorian walking around with the see-through mesh shirt?
Dorian likes little Asian women. That's all I'm gonna say about Dorian.
Oh my God.
I'm not gonna say anything else because Dorian is in a whole different place now. He's Mr. Yoga and love and peace and all that stuff. I love Dorian. I have nothing bad to say about Dorian. He likes little Asian chicks. That's all.
Was it true that Valentino doesn't do any drugs? That he wouldn't do drugs?
Little Asian chicks are better than boy girls.
I think that's what he's referring to. I mean,
Valentino, a lot of people have problems with the guy. I never had a problem with him. I always thought he was hilarious.
Yeah, I think so too.
I thought he was funny as hell. And I told you the story one time we were at the Sound Factory. I guess he liked the trannies. Like if that's his thing, God bless him, man. It doesn't bother me.
Right. He said that he never drank alcohol, he never did drugs, and all he would do is ephedra. Will you believe that?
I don't know if that's true or not, but I personally was not that close to him to know that. I just saw him a couple of times out, and that night at the factory was the time that I actually, he asked me to introduce him to a tranny, which I did.
What did he look like?
Asian.
Oh, they're all with the Asians, huh?
Yeah, I guess so, man. I don't know. I had the human tranny detector called Victor Martinez with me. That's all I needed.
Yeah, Victor knew everything. He knew who everyone at that place was.
Spot one 10 miles away. Dude, bro, stay away from that one, bro. That's a dude, bro.
Yeah, he was scared by those. He didn't like the trannies. Yeah, he was.
No, he didn't. Because Victor was like, and Victor's always been like, don't try to trick people. If you are what you are. Victor's very peace and love, but don't try to trick them.
Right.
If you're a freak, you're a freak. Tell them that and you're good to go.
Right. Now, you were shaking your head when I was asking him about Valentino.
Valentino.
You were shaking your head no when I asked him about if Valentino did any drugs.
Because when I knew King, and I think he would say this is true. We were younger, and that was really in the equation.
No,
you know
that came later.
That came later. So I'm like, really? Like, I didn't even know.
No, that was after. That was after you. King, who was the big party group at the Sound Factory every night? I know Robbie Lopez was always there, but who was like the regular crew?
I'm going to destroy him right now. Robbie Lopez is the devil. Robbie Lopez is the reincarnation of Mephistopheles. He's got two fucking horns that come out of his head. It was because of him that we all got dragged into that fucking factory, man. Robbie Lopez on top of the list. Chris Cormier, whenever he came into town, right. Chris is he's another level.
He'd never say no. He'd say no.
Yeah, exactly. Who else? Titus, of course. Victor is a legend when it comes to that. Darian Bond. I don't know if you recognize that name.
I know Darian.
Darian Bond in Chicago. Oh, excuse me, Detroit. Darian he is another lunatic.
Light heavyweight champ. Yeah.
Yeah, and then a bunch of like amateur guys. It was like a very tight knit group of people, and we really looked after each other. But that was after with the Ameen thing. But Dave, I have a story to tell you about Ameen if you want to hear it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, DC Grand Prix. We all go. Ameen had two people in the show. He had Steve. I forgot Steve's name. Black guy, really shredded.
Steve
Johnson. And he had a light-skinned black guy. I forgot what his name was in the heavyweights. Light skin, round muscle bellies.
Yeah. Give me a minute, I'll remember him.
So we go through prejudging, and it's close. It's close between the Ameen's guys and somebody else. We get back to Ameen's crib. Ameen has 5 pounds of dip in his mouth. Sitting in the corner, staring at this kid as this kid is looking at him for advice, from his coach.
Yeah.
So Ameen goes, and I'm going to say this, Dave, exactly as it happened.
Okay.
Ameen goes, fuck it. We're going nuclear. He grabs a roll of Phenoplex, pours it in a pestle and mortar. He starts grinding, and this kid's just looking at him, and he's grinding this Phenoplex down to a powder. And I'm looking at him like, what the fuck is he gonna do? He goes, fuck it. We're going nuclear. You can win this thing. He grabs Phenoplex, pours it into a syringe, loads it up, and puts an 18 gauge. He mixes it with B12 like this, and he goes, turn around, and he stabs him in the ass, and he pushes it in so fast the kid nearly passes out, and then he falls to the ground, and he goes, now you're gonna win the overall. That is a true fucking story.
He won the overall.
He did?
He said, you're gonna win the overall.
Won the overall.
Nuclear.
He didn't sleep for 2 weeks, though, after that show, probably, the guy. The true story, huh?
That was a classic story in the legendary status.
This guy's, he was an accountant. He wasn't like, he was studying for his CPA. He used to wear his socks up to his knees. No shit, he's a fucking millionaire now. Like,
wow.
His accounting company does real well. We're still friends.
Is that where you gave him the name The Mad Scientist?
No.
I mean, listen, the truth of the matter with the mad scientist is we were all fucking guinea pigs, man. He experimented on us. I'm the first person to say it. He experimented on all of us.
Right.
And it was just, and his brother, Adine. Adine was an amazing bodybuilder, As a matter of fact, at my very first show was the DC, AAU Mr. DC. I went up against Adine, and the battle of me and Adine on stage got just as much hype and crowd reaction as teenagers than the entire fucking show and the open class. I mean,
even
the
before
audience were going nuts because me and Adine were going at it. 2 teenagers with potential and with the bright futures, and we're going at it. And here's me looking at Adine, who was in much better condition I was. I mean, we were close, but he was much better condition. And that morning I had woken up and I had corn pops and skim milk.
Oh.
I don't know what the fuck I was doing.
Evidently,
that's when Ameen came up to me after prejudging, and I was upset. I was in tears coming down my face. I got second place, and I was pissed. He goes, you have no fucking idea what you're doing, do you? It's like, no, I don't. He goes, all right, we're going to talk. And that's when he introduced
You forgot
me
to tell him how many shots you drank for the night show. How many shots did you drink?
That's all irrelevant and semantics, man. I had no idea what the fuck I was doing.
Oh, you were drinking alcohol backstage?
I have no idea what I was doing, man.
I think your brother Adine, didn't he do the Batman movie with me? Am I making that up?
No, he didn't do the Batman movie. He was there, though. He was there for the audition.
Oh, maybe
and I believe Al Q was there. You were there, right?
Right, with Al Q and Jimmy Palencia. Yeah.
Al Q was there. You were there. Yeah, Gerard Dente was too, wasn't he? Who, by the way, I also helped him.
I don't know if Gerard was there. They was filming the exterior scenes of the second. I think it was the second Batman movie, and they got all us bodybuilders in New York. It was Al Q Gurley, who was a great NPC national champion. It was Jimmy Palencia. It was me. I brought some guy in. I thought there was another guy from Jersey in there as well. My friend RJ was in the crew as well, and we had such a good time. It would start filming at 6 p.m. and would go all night to 6 a.m. And we got paid a ridiculous amount of money to basically sit around in craft services and eat the whole time. And I was like 300-something pounds. I didn't care. It was like free food for me, and I was getting paid like $1,500 for the week. And we got credit for doing the Batman movie. We all got our SAG cards for it. It was so much fun. It was one of those things, once again, back in the 90s that just was like, it was like a bodybuilder's dream to be in a movie like that. And I remember Al Q Gurley thought he was going to be like a movie star after that. I'm like, Al, they got masks on us. No one's gonna even see your face. How are you gonna make it in the movies after this? I remember seeing your brother on a lot of. I would see your brother Ameen on a lot of commercial auditions.
Yeah, he did some commercials, and Lou Zwick basically talked him out of bodybuilding and said that you're too good looking, you can make more money acting, and he did a Law and Order. He's done a few short series too. He did a couple parts in some movies. You can look him up, Adinalai on the acting, shows you all the stuff he's done. Yeah, man. I mean those were the times. He actually could have been a better bodybuilder, but to be honest with you, like Kamali, Adina and I sat down and we talked about it, and we took a serious look at the drugs that Dom was taking and whether or not Adine was willing to do it, and I couldn't justify. You have to understand, I was giving my brother everything. I couldn't justify doing that. I didn't feel as if I needed to steer him into the direction of bodybuilding, that there were better things ahead for him. He also has a college degree. He's very intelligent, and he happens to be the CEO of the company that I hold patents on. So he's, I'm glad that he didn't become a pro bodybuilder, but in the long run, that was one of the bonds that we had that made us very close as brothers. Kamali, Dean, and I started our own company called OptiBody back in the day. That was one of the things that we did. We tried to start our own personal training business, and then we all ended up doing different things.
By the way, let me give you a shot. Let me give a shout out to a guy you guys were talking about yesterday, the heavyweight competitor that Craig helped for the Collegiate Nationals. His name was Chris Kadlachek.
Yes, okay. Chris. Yes.
Yeah, and Chris actually he sends me a little email messages and Instagram messages every once in a blue moon saying, "Hey, bro, remember this?" And he'll send a picture of us on stage together and stuff. Chris was an incredible guy, man. He was a really
very nice guy.
And he had the best. I mean, he was like a little Phil Hernon. He had that type of muscle, but
really?
Yeah, he just decided that he wants to go a different route and not bodybuilding, which I respect.
Conditioning is the reason that you beat him, in my opinion. You just were so dry, and there was no water between the skin and the muscle was super
I couldn't
defined.
Breathe. I was wheezing on stage. I was like, that's how I was breathing, and that's when Mannion, I told you this last time, Dave, Mannion, I hit 2 poses and said, "Get the fuck off the stage."
He didn't want you to die.
He said, "Just get off." And then, of course, Ameen is in the 3rd row behind the judges screaming, "He's in critical condition." Get off the stage. And Mannion's looking back at him saying, "Hey, who's this kid? Tell him to shut the hell up. This is not good for the sport."
Where did you get the ability to do those crazy moves on stage with that Terminator routine?
I was always a breakdancer and the showman and all that stuff. That shit came easy. Look, man, I said it once and said it 1,000 times. How many people have asked me, how long did you practice your routines for the Olympia? I never practiced my routines. I used to go to Body Rock, say, "Hey, Steve, I want this here, this robot sound here, this hip-hop song here, this voiceover here. Put it together, make it 5 minutes long, and I'll pick it up in 3 weeks." And always 2 weeks before the Olympia or the Arnold Classic, he would come to my house, play it for me, and say, "Is this what you want?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's it." I would listen to it a couple times. I said, "Fuck it, I'll improvise on stage." That's it.
Well, like for example, when we went over it, he would say the same thing, and I actually was helping people with their routines. Like Steve Johnson didn't know how to pose; he didn't know bodybuilding at all, and then he did a really good routine. Kamali was like, "I'm not going to remember it," and he was really training hard, so I believed him. I'm like, "You're not going to." So we picked certain parts, certain cues in the music where he knew he was going to do something, like the part where the African Bambata, where he went like this and like that.
Right.
That we planned that, and then the way he turned around to hit the most muscular, we planned that. But a lot of the other stuff in between, that was all improvisation because.
And one more thing, man. When I say I was wheezing on stage and stuff like that, that's because of extreme conditioning.
Right.
And not necessarily of the dangerous shit that some people like to do.
Right.
The most dangerous thing that I ever did in bodybuilding was the year they tested for diuretics at the Olympia, which was 2001, right?
Right.
Yeah. Then at that time, Chad came up and said, "Okay, we'll do Dimidex." Or it was a combination of 3 or 4 things that weren't on the list.
Yeah.
That, whatever the fuck that powder was, I'm telling you, that shit was like sticking a sticking a tube down your throat and sucking out every ounce of water and fluid and air you have in your lungs. And I said it, man, if we can find a videotape of the Olympia that year, after my first comparison, I walked back into the lineup and I started seeing black dots coming at me. and I'm looking in the audience and I said to myself, I said, I can't fucking believe I'm going to pass out on stage at the Mandalay Bay at my first Olympics. And thank God for Rope Man, because Rope was standing about 5 feet away from me, and I looked over to my left. I remember Dennis James was standing on this side and Tom Prince was over here. I kind of like almost leaned on Tom, and he looked over at me, and I looked at Rope, and Rope said, "Get off the stage! Get off the stage!" Because he saw my eyes rolling back. Yeah. So I kind of composed myself, and I knew my dad. My dad really didn't like bodybuilding that much, and he's in the audience, and I said, okay, I can make it off stage. So you can clearly see on the prejudging video that I'm walking slowly, but I'm walking almost like a machine, concentrating on every step. And as soon as I right around the curtain, flat on my face.
Really?
Oh yeah, I fell flat on my face. And again, the bodybuilding gods were looking for me that day. First I had Rope Man, and then Fairfax Hackley was backstage.
Yeah, he's great.
And Fairfax started screaming at everybody. I can hear it, and then I kind of looked up, and he looked at me, and after he told everybody to shut the fuck up, he goes, "What do you need?" And as soon as he said that, I said, "Gatorade." He got me some Gatorade. Yeah. He goes, "What else do you need?" I said, "Oxygen." He gave me oxygen. And I don't know about you guys, but I love that shit brings you back like this.
Man, I'm trying to get my doctor to give me one right now.
5 or 6 months of that, and I was like, okay, here we go. And then as soon as I walked back on stage, they called me, Orville, and Marcus Rule for a call-out.
Wow. Now, would you equate what happened to you at that Olympia as to being in like a K-hole in the Sound Factory?
I've never been in a K. I never did K, to be honest with you. That's one I never did. I was the math. I'll tell you the most I ever did. Here we go, Dave. This is what you wanted. I'll give you your medicine right now. New Year's Eve 2003. I did 23 ecstasy tabs in one night.
Oh my God!
Fuck off.
But when I say one night, you gotta realize it was starting at 9 o'clock at night and then ended at 10 p.m. Monday. Right, so we continued. The club didn't close for like 2 days.
Jay Cutler, if you're listening, don't fall the fuck out of your seat right now. 23, okay? That tops any record you might have thought I might have had or anything. 20. Okay, that's fucking. You're the man.
23 of them. We did every 2 hours. I took 2. Every 2 hours, I took 2, as it was adding up. Rob Lopez is the devil.
What do they look like? Do you remember?
Who knows, man? That club? Are you fucking kidding me? You just put your hand down in your fucking in your cargo pants. That's what all the drug dealers had, cargo pants. They come up and they go, "Here, take 2. It's like taking 4." The fucking good old days.
You know what? Happy New Year to both of you guys. On that note, and we're gonna call it quits for today. But we're gonna have a part 3 for sure. People are loving these old time stories, and they're bringing back a lot of good memories. So thank you, Ameen. Thank you, King Kamali. And for now, we are out of time. I'm Dave Palumbo with another edition of Live With. We'll see you next week for part 3.
Peace.